Alan, good to see you as always. Thanks for making a bit of time to come and have a chat about what you're doing. It's interesting stuff, and I'm sure lots of people will be looking forward to hearing about it. So, um, let me start the conversation off with the kind of why to that, go back to that very popular phrase. You start with the why. I mean, tell us about the mission. What is it you're trying to do with Red Carpet?
So, first of all, it's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. The why actually, sometimes, they say people start companies for many different reasons. And mine was because of frustration. So I used to be general manager at Luton Airport. And I'm going back to sort of 94. And for a couple of years, my main objective there was to provide a good level of service for the clientele coming through Luton. And it seemed to be an impossible task.
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
was the first thing. And if you go back to 94, the service industry wasn't great. Service was not on the top of the agenda for many companies. So I decided after 2.5 years of banging my head against the wall, I decided that I was going to start a company that was purely based on service. And what I wanted to do is my mission and my goals was to make people feel special because that was not happening in the industry at the time. And I had this mad thing in my head to say, well, I'm going to call it Red Carpet without even establishing whether the Red Carpet name was available on Company's House. And thankfully it was. So that was the inspiration really to say, you know what, let's provide people with a good level of service, make them feel special no matter what they do, no matter where they go. And that was really the inspiration of the why.
Okay. I mean, it's a very powerful thing, isn't it? Customer service. If you get it right, it has huge benefits. There's no doubt about
Especially nowadays, with the way the trends have gone, and especially since COVID, the different trends, especially in the hospitality industry, it's all about service and it's all about personalization.
it. Yeah, absolutely.
Everything in the industry was all very, very standard. So no matter who you were going to get the same service as everyone else. And that's changed, and it should change because every individual is different, and every individual has different levels of expectation. And that's what they have to, literally understand and
Yeah.
deliver accordingly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let me ask you about the moment that you thought red carpet could have global impact. I know because we've spoken about this before. I know you're, very ambitious. Tell us about that point at which you thought, this could be we could do something really big here. And just talk
Yeah,
us through.
no, it's a good question because I didn't start out by saying I want to become a global business. It really was taking it step by step. And, being based in London, the UK market was obviously the initial market we looked at. And then as we started to develop with our clientele, they wanted different things, they wanted new things. We started to look further afield. We looked abroad in different countries. What could we offer in different countries that we couldn't offer them in the UK? And all of a sudden, this whole world opened up because it's so diverse. There are so many different experiences to be had. And at the time, my vision was about providing great experiences, nothing else. It could be whatever, but it was about the experience and can they get this experience anywhere else? And what we found was a lot of the loyalty we had, we were providing such unusual experiences that they came back and said, well, what's next?
Give
So
us an example of one of those experiences, just for the people that are listening to, just give us an example of one that is where people would say that this is pretty unique. I mean, give us an
well,
example.
one was it was a big corporate company who was entertaining another big corporate company, and they wanted to do an incentive, and it was something that they wanted. It was more middle to senior management. They wanted something really special, and if you like, the brief was anywhere in the world because it was, we just want something special. So at the time, we chose Cape Town.
Right.
And Cape Town was becoming to be popular, but still not many people have visited. And the difference is that when we start to look at anything we do, we want to be different.
Mm.
So I researched it very, very well. I was in Cape Town. I looked at all the different hotels that we could provide accommodation, looked at all the different restaurants. And what I found was that there was a company there that actually own fighter jets.
Oh, wow.
And I approached the owner and I said, listen, we want to do something really special for certain people. I need to understand what you do, how you do it. I need to go through the safety. I need to go through everything. So I want to go and fly a fighter jet, which I did. And I could literally take an hour of telling you exactly what you do with the training.
I'm sure you take more than an hour.
But we
It
haven't
sounds
got.
fascinating.
So I literally had the experience and I just thought, how many people get to fly a fighter jet commercially? And it's very, very rare because the only two places at the time were either Russia or Cape Town. Now, you wouldn't want to do it in Russia with a MiG because the maintenance is awful and the safety record's not so good. So we decided to do it with Cape Town and this company, which flew Hawker Hunters. And then it was 3 months before the incentive finished. And I said to the client, and I said, listen, we've now got everything in place. In 3 months' time, we're going to Cape Town. Why don't you offer an additional incentive for all of the salespeople that you're targeting and give them an opportunity to fly a fighter jet? He said, have you gone stark raving mad? I said, listen, you'll have to trust me on this one because I've been there, I've done it, I've experienced it, I've checked all the safety records. And I think if we do it properly and we do it where you have a revenue target in mind of how much more revenue you want to generate in relation to the additional cost, I don't think you'll be disappointed. He decided to go with it, and it was the best decision he said he'd made because within the first month, he accrued an additional £1 million worth of revenue.
Wow. That is
so it was all about understanding the client. It was all about what their levels of expectations were. And their level of expectation wasn't anything because they never knew what to expect. So, their level of expectation was quite low. So we just blew them out of the water by giving them an experience that they would never, ever forget. And to this day, and I'm probably going back 17, 18 years now on that experience, but to this day, people still talk.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting your point about what can we do in other countries that we can't do here. I mean, most people think about I've got this great product and we'll make it fit with every other country, whereas you're actually saying the opposite, which I think is really interesting. So, okay, well, what can we do that's completely different somewhere else?
Yeah.
Which, of course, that's a really powerful way of standing out from everybody else, isn't it?
But it's an interesting point because most people, if you take tour operators, for example, they have a product which they want to sell to as many people as possible. We don't do that. Our approach is, what do you want? We'll go and get it.
Yeah.
And, I think we were 2 years old, when I came up with an idea of a strapline because of the responses we kept getting from our customers was, wow, you can do anything. So I came up with a strapline. And it was the answer's yes, what's the question? And that stuck in my mind because there wasn't anything we couldn't do. And even when I did interviews with the press, they used to say to me, what about this? What about this? And then this whole strapline thing came along. And I said, look, if you look at it objectively, if it's physically possible and it's legal, we can do it.
Yeah.
And when I look back, I mean, we'll be celebrating 30 years next year. So when I look back on 29 and a half years, there's nothing we haven't achieved in terms of what the client wanted.
And it really illustrates
across 58 countries.
Yeah, and it really illustrates how your mindset's different, which I think is the impressive thing about it, as much as anything. I mean, it was a great. I mean, tell us about tell us about being a CEO and what that means to you. I mean, how do you feel about being the CEO? I mean, people tell me it's a roller coaster. That's certainly been my experience. I mean, what are your feelings about being the CEO?
It's a roller coaster, as you can see with these grey hairs. I'm only 40. But it really is a roller coaster. And I think that you need to understand that if you want to start your company and you want to be a CEO, everything rests on your shoulders because you have so much responsibility for not just people that you employ, but you need to be a visionary in terms of your approach on what you do. You need to start to develop the people you have. Your recruitment process is really important. How you recruit, because that's going to save you lots of money in the future. And there are so many aspects. I mean, especially with us, we do a risk analysis. And that's a really good example of flying fighter jets. There's a massive risk.
Mm.
So there are so many elements to take into account. And I have like 6 or 7 elements that I work to and say, if we stick to this, we're not going to go too far wrong.
Right.
And one thing, especially in this business, and all the team know me for saying it over and over again, and I will always say it over and over again in what we do. You check something, you check something again, and then you check it again.
Mm.
And that really, I mean, most people say, well, that's a bit obsessive, but if you book a flight on the wrong date and they can't get there, it's not excessive. It's all about that real attention to detail. And
Yeah.
sometimes, as chief exec, you know what you want, you know the vision you want to create, you know the kind of mission you want to deliver, and getting that to your staff is really important.
Yeah.
And so they understand. And again, I had a saying I had from many, many years ago is tell me I may remember, remind me I may forget, involve me, I'll understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, a lot of it is making them understand the importance of what they do and making them understand they're an important part of the team. Making them understand it's without them we couldn't deliver
Yeah.
services and the experiences. And they feel special. And I think, the biggest thing, and especially when it comes to staff turnover, is making them feel that they are part of the team and they're contributing to the business. And that's a tough one. And especially as the company grows and you have, more staff, that's the tough one.
Yeah.
And then it's about employing really good managers to look after, different departments.
Yeah. I mean, we'll come back to the team in a second. Let me ask you before we move off the kind of topic of the job of the CEO. I mean, what sort of things gave you sleepless nights? I mean, I imagine there's quite a few things on there.
Well, do you know what? That's a really good question because you can't really have sleepless nights and worry about anything. You have to do what you have to do during that day. You've got to be
Mm.
comfortable with the
Mm.
decisions you've made. And it's like anything. You review it. Once you review it and you think it's not quite on the right path, you change it. And I always think sometimes, especially when you worry about situations that are not in your control, and a lot of things are not in your control. So there's nothing you can do. You just got to manage it. So, for example, if we got a group of 50 people going out on a flight and the flight's cancelled, I can't worry about it. It just happens.
Yeah.
So you just got to have that risk assessment that you do. And what I call always the what if scenario. What if the hotel's fully booked for whatever reason? What if the flight cancelled? What if anything? And it takes away that element of I'm worried about things. If you've really got your act together, you've got everything you could possibly do to making it happen, then there's nothing to worry about unless something does happen. And then you don't worry about it. You just deal with it.
Yeah. 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 I mean, your point's an interesting one. The kind of what if thing. That's a really interesting observation there. To come back to the team, I mean, I guess part of it is you having those scenarios going through your mind. But as you get bigger and you employ more people, I mean, you've also got to get your managers thinking that way as well. I mean, do you have thoughts on how you get people thinking the right way? I mean, I'm a great believer. People are your most important asset as long as they're doing the right thing. I mean, if they're not doing the right thing, they're not your most important asset. In fact, they can be a massive liability, actually. But what are your thoughts on getting people into the right mindset? Because that seems to me to be pretty important.
That is, and I'll tell you, it's something that's really started from the very first employee that I employed. And it was again when we started in '96, it was a one-man band, and there was this young lady, and she kept ringing me and saying, have you got any jobs? And I said, look, not at the moment. I said, but by the way, have you got any experience? She said, no. And then she rang me again a few weeks later, and she said, have you got any opportunities now? And I said, no. And I said, but I'm really looking for someone for with some experience. And she got really aggravated, bless her, and said, well, are you supposed to get a job? Are you supposed to get experience if you can't get a job? And that really resonated with me. And also my mindset was, we're in hospitality business. So it's not so much the CV, it's more about the character.
Yeah.
So I said to her, meet me tomorrow. If you can meet me tomorrow in the wine bar, which was opposite my office in London, I want to talk to you. And I'd never met her before. So she came to the wine bar with a little CV, and I said, I'm not interested in the CV. What do you want to drink? Talk to me. Talk to me. I need to understand you. I need to understand your character. And we just had a chat. And to me, that's when the light bulb moment came.
Right.
She has the character to deliver the level of service I want and the right attitude to my customers. She hasn't got any experience. I can teach that.
Mm.
There's lots of things you can, and I learned this from a very early stage. There's lots of things you can teach people. You can't teach character.
Yeah.
They've either got great character or they haven't. And over the years, and it sounds crazy, and even sometimes when I do talks, I speak to HR directors, they think I'm mad, but it's absolutely worked. All of the staff we ever employed have been in that wine bar.
Right.
Because if I know they have the right attitude, they have a great character, can they deliver a level of service that our clients expect? And are they willing to listen? You get that in a, if you like, a casual environment rather than an interview on a one-to-one for a job, because people are nervous and they say all kinds of different things. And most people will bend the rules when it comes to CVs. So, for me, it was, I need to meet the people.
Yeah. It's very interesting.
Mindset.
It's a very interesting observation that, I mean, I've come across quite a few CEOs that don't take a lot of time and energy. They don't get heavily involved in recruiting people. And I think, well, if you don't get involved in recruiting people, how do you know you've got the right people? And if you're in a business where there's a big service component, getting the right people is pretty important, really. So I can absolutely see why taking such a big interest in recruiting the right people has paid off. I mean,
And also, I'll add, and this was something that goes back to the Four Seasons Hotel Group, is that when they first started, or when they first opened the first resort, which was in Hawaii, it was taking a long time to recruit. And eventually, Isidore Sharp, who was the owner, says to the guys, listen, guys, why is it taking so long? And they were saying, well, we've got such a great level of interest. We've got all these senior people from all these big brands. And, we've got lots and lots of other people. So we're trying to be very, very careful. And he said, well, who else have you got? He said, well, we've got, this one, that one, and we've got a lot of pineapple farms. And he said, well, what's wrong with the pineapple farmers? He said, well, they've just got no experience about the hotel industry. And Isidore Sharp made a decision. I want you to employ the pineapple farmers. And let me tell you why. I don't want people from other brands coming in here telling me how to run my business. You should do it the Ritz-Carlton way. You should do it the Mandarin way. Or you should do it the Marriott way. I want people who would firstly value the fact that they're working for Four Seasons. And secondly, are prepared to do whatever they're prepared to do because they're so proud in working for the Four Seasons. And he employed pineapple farmers and he trained them the Four Seasons way. And that's something that resonated about, what kind of people, and you're right, a lot of people won't waste time investing in that particular area of recruitment. And it's critical because as everyone knows, the cost of recruitment is massive.
Yeah.
Especially as you grow and especially as you go worldwide.
Yeah, I think that's changing a little bit. I mean, I think a lot of people would now recognise that you've got to recruit for attitude and train for skills, if you like. But the reality is that a lot of people don't do it. So it's
and I say hospitality, I think slightly different because it is all about every day you're interacting.
Yeah.
Whereas IT or technology or other industries, not so much. It is about skills based.
Yeah, yeah. And let me ask you a question. So obviously you've now got quite a big team in lots of different locations. I mean, how has the business evolved as you've built it? I mean, presumably it's quite a lot different now to the way it was when you started out. I mean, or maybe it's different in some ways, but not in others. I mean, how has the business evolved as you've kind of globalized?
It's different for sure because when you've got a particular base, like say when we started in the UK, there's certain things to take into account. So as you grow, and as you say, it's not just about staff, it's all about finding the right partners. And for us, that's critical. We need hotels to put people in, we need restaurants for them, for us to take them to. So it's about growing the base of not just staff, but suppliers and people that we relationships to deliver the business. So it's changed drastically. And the biggest thing that one of the biggest things that I did, but I never realized at the time when I decided how costly it would be. I said we would never place any clients in a hotel, no matter where it was in the world, unless we visited that hotel and did what we call a site inspection. So we've spent years and years and years just visiting different countries, looking at hotels, looking at restaurants, looking at places of interest, and then trying to find the right suppliers, and then pulling it together and saying, right, we're going to work with this one, this one, and this one. Mm. That was critical, and that was more complicated as we grew to different countries. Mm. And I'll give you a really good example, and I know you're probably going to ask me the most difficult one was Colombia. And we were the first company in Europe to take a group to Colombia. And it was in 97, 98 when there were real problems then.
Yeah.
There were real problems. So, it is really challenging, but sometimes, you push the boundaries and say, no one has ever done this. And on that particular event, we had to bid with 3 other companies. And the client said to me, he said, they're putting forward Barbados and Antigua, and you've put forward Colombia. He said, what are you doing? I said, well, you'll have to trust me on this one because it's the most unusual thing you'll ever do. Mm. And obviously we won the bid. So, pushing the boundaries sometimes are a good thing to do. And especially if you know your clientele and you know what their expectations are.
And again, to come back to the team thing, what are your thoughts on getting the team to understand that? Because
that is constant training, and that's one thing. And because of my background with management colleges and training salespeople, that was one of the things I insisted on. The training process is so important, and it's not just training on product; it's training on lots and lots of different things. And again, being in hospitality, there were so many aspects to it. And sometimes you may not speak the language, or you don't understand the culture. So there were so many things to train on to make sure that, we fully understood everything we were doing. And one of the biggest things that's come out of COVID, funny enough, is training. Mm. People have now really started to understand that they need to invest, and especially in hospitality, by the way, they need to invest in their people, because what happened was COVID came along. After COVID, they couldn't get staff. And there were lots of different reasons, which we can't go into the details today, but there was lots of different reasons why they couldn't get staff. And in fact, the Savoy was one of the first hotels. The general manager said, we've changed our strategy. Our biggest, most important aspect is now training and staff. Mm. And people realized that, that they would, and as you said it earlier, they're your most important asset, but people forget about that. Yeah. They don't tend to understand. And when I do certain coaching, I say to people, what's the most important thing in a luxury supercar? It's the engine, it's the heart of the car. Without the engine, you're not going anywhere. And that's the same for a business or a hotel, especially a hotel. What's the most important thing? It's not the product, it's not it's the people. Mm. And, you could be in the best penthouse in the world and, you can't get a drink because no one's serving.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's if you put it into perspective, that's the whole thing. So for me, the training aspect was making them understand this is why it's so important. And it's not a 9-to-5 job. That's for sure.
Just to follow that up a little bit further. One of the other interesting challenges with being in lots of different jurisdictions, lots of different countries, is of course that doing business in America very different to doing business in Colombia, for example. What are your thoughts on handling those variations? Because they're kind of cultural nuances, if you like. What's your thoughts on handling that in such a wide range of jurisdictions?
It's actually understanding the culture. And also it's understanding the cuisine, and that really goes hand in hand in our business. Okay. So unless you visit, unless you go and you actually meet the people and you choose very carefully who your suppliers are and who your partners are, you can't take it, you can't leave it to chance. And it's like you booking a holiday and there's 4 or 5 different options of hotels you've never been. And no matter what you read as a review, you're still taking a chance. Because you just never know. And that's one thing about the hospitality business and the travel industry. You pay your money up front to go to the hotel. It's not until you get there is that
Yeah.
when you understand what you actually get. And especially when hotels are saying we're a luxury hotel and we're this and we're that. And when you get there, you think this is not what I paid for.
Mm.
Because mainly the staff cannot deliver that level of service that you expect and what you pay for.
Yeah.
So it's critical when you've got that global business, especially with the travel side of it. It's critical to really get to the country, really understand it.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, Paul, we've been to some countries and we said there is no way in a million years we can send clients here because it's just too difficult.
Yeah.
So you
I mean,
make those decisions.
yeah. I mean, one of the interesting points you made there is the relationship between food and cuisine and culture, which I think is a really interesting one because it's kind of a visual manifestation of the culture, isn't it? I mean, the food is
Oh,
very different in
absolutely.
India to the way it is in Germany or whatever, and it's a very interesting point that. Um, uh,
And time zones as well. So
yeah,
someone from Asia comes to London and at 4 o'clock in the morning, he wants a massaman curry in the best hotels in the world, he will get one
yeah,
because they've got chefs or they've got hoteliers who understand the different cultures and the different cuisines and also the different time zones,
yeah,
which is
yeah.
something else to take into account.
Yeah, another factor. And in terms of the things that might have gone wrong, I mean, what's the biggest crisis? I know you've been through probably quite a few, but what would you say is the biggest crisis you and your team have had to deal with, and how did you resolve it?
That's also a really good question because we've had lots of issues, but I wouldn't ever call them crises.
Right.
We've had people uh, lose their tickets on flights, and we've got them on the flight. We've had lots and lots of different incidents. I mean, we've even had a client who came to us and said, "We have a big issue, Alan. We've booked a private jet." And he was honest enough to tell me it wasn't with us, and they let him down. And they're now at the airport without a
Mm.
private jet.
And how did you find him a private jet?
We have a great network.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key to spending time building your network, building your suppliers.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes you know where to go to, and especially depending on the country and all this type of thing. So I mean, if I look back, it is a really good question because in 29 years, I don't think we've ever had a crisis.
Mm.
We've had lots of different silly little things, but we've never had a total crisis where we think, oh my God, I don't know,
Mm.
we're just not going to deal with this.
I mean, it's an interesting sort of observation you've made about not seeing it as a crisis. I mean, some people would see it as a crisis. I mean, what you're really talking about is a sort of a resilient mindset. It's this isn't a crisis. This is just a problem to solve.
Yeah,
Which,
just another challenge in your day-to-day operation. Yeah.
yeah, and again, I mean, again, that's really important thing for the team to learn, isn't it? Because people can find those things
Ah,
quite overwhelming. I mean,
yeah. I mean, it's funny you say about learning, and this is a great learning curve. And again, another time we had a group going to South Africa, and our philosophy, as I said earlier on, you check, you check, and you check it again. And one of the girls who was booking the flights booked the flights, and then when it came to the process of checking and everything, what happened was she booked the night of the flight,
mhm.
didn't realise that the flight arrives the next day. So
Okay.
she booked the hotel that night, but we didn't arrive till the morning. That cost us £10,000. I don't forget that cost us £10,000 because we had to pay for the hotel because it was booked. And everyone turned around and said she's going to get sacked. And you know what? Bless her, she thought she was going to get sacked. She learned the hard way,
Yeah.
and that again, would sacking her have got a result of getting your £10,000 back? No. The best way you can teach people is learn by your mistakes, and it's a costly mistake, I understand, but it's one of those things, and sometimes those are the challenges you have with your own business.
I guess it's creating a culture where people do learn from their mistakes.
Yeah, and also giving them the autonomy to make certain decisions. I mean, obviously there are processes, especially when there's big sums of money to be played around. But it gives them the autonomy, and then they do feel part of the team, and they feel as though they're contributing to the success of the company, which is still really important.
Mm. And you mentioned learning. I mean, when you look back on the journey, what would you say are the main things that you have learned from the experience? You started as a one-man band. You're now a big operation. You started in the UK. You're now all over the planet. I mean, you must have been quite a lot of learning along that journey, I would have
Yeah,
thought.
no,
What are
you
the big
do.
takeaways?
Yeah, you do. And you don't just learn by mistakes like the one I told you. You just learn about so many different aspects. One thing you do learn about is nothing is guaranteed. No matter what you think,
Mm,
nothing is guaranteed. What you think is 100%, it never is. So as you say earlier on, is having that mindset of being resilient because you need to be. You need to move in a different direction if you have to. Um, and sometimes, and you learn that your staff will make mistakes, no matter how much you check on things, no
mm,
matter what you, and you just have to learn to be resilient. And sometimes, you know, some senior management, and I've seen it, especially in the hotel industry, they're not resilient. They want to shoot the messenger,
mm.
and you can't do that.
It
You
doesn't
know,
work, does it?
yeah, no, no, absolutely. So one thing I've understood is I'm a lot more tolerant in, certain things. Whereas, sometimes you think, well, I'm going to get upset. There's no point getting upset. And that's one thing I've learned. You can get upset, you can lose sleep, as you said earlier. You can worry about things. It doesn't change the situation.
Mm,
So you just got to accept the situation and you've got to be resilient in finding a solution to whatever it is.
yeah.
And I've learned that over the years. And I'm certainly a lot more tolerant in terms of the way I see things and the way I do things.
Yeah, I mean, I said my view about that is, I mean, it's a very good point you've made there. My view is there's no point worrying about it unless you can do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you can do something about it, then that's what you should be doing.
Yeah,
No,
no,
worrying about it
that's it.
doesn't help one jot, does it? And if you were to, I mean, it's obviously been an interesting journey for you. I mean, is that if you were starting over, if you were back at square one, is there any one thing? Is there a piece of advice you would give yourself if you were back at the start about what you know now? That you'd like to have known at the beginning? I mean, what would that be?
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. And I think most people would say, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One of the biggest things, I used to work in the City of London. In my before I started the company, I worked for British Telecom and I worked before it was HSBC Midland Bank. Um, and I just assumed when I started the company, because I knew lots of different people in the corporate world, and a lot of them were friends, I could approach them and they would give me business. It didn't work like that.
Okay. So how
So
did you resolve that? I mean, that must have been a bit of a shock to the system, thinking I'm going
it
to win all this
was,
work
it
really
was,
easily. How did you
and
resolve it?
also in hospitality, it sounds awful, but it's true. They expect to be taken to lunch and dinner.
Mm, yeah.
So I spent at the time a lot of money entertaining people to, if you like, showcase them what we can do and who our suppliers were and how we could look after them. But it never really ended up in business. And what I realized, as a really good leveler, is that you can't depend on people that you know and friends for business.
Mm,
You've got to look at it objectively. Do your research, which companies could deal with your benefit, could do with your services. A lot of our services were really good because we could save companies thousands on, especially booking hotels, because we used to get preferential rates.
right.
So a lot of it was about helping them. They, no matter what our fee was, they would still end up saving money. Or we would say to them, "Don't go in September, go in November, and we'll get you a better rate because it's a lower season." But that's one thing I learned is that when you assume you're going to get business from people that you know, it's not going to happen.
Mm. I mean, it's interesting you describe that because most people think that that is the way to win business is to take people out and entertain them.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
doesn't always work though, does it?
It doesn't. And the other thing that I tell you what, another interesting point that COVID brought was this: was when COVID was around, people were still doing business on their phones and Zoom calls and all the rest of it. And companies realised that their salespeople, especially, didn't have to take people to lunch or dinner because they were still getting the results.
Mm.
And that was another thing that came out of it.
Yeah.
They said, actually, we don't need to do that.
Yeah.
This is proof the revenue's still coming in.
Yeah, it's funny how the world changes. I remember at the beginning of my career, I had to deal with this guy who he ran a racing business actually, but he loved curry, and he used to love taking us to this curry house. Not because it was going to change the business or anything, but it was an excuse for the company to pay for him to go for a curry with a bunch of people he liked. And I wish that world was still with us, but that's long gone, I think.
Yeah,
You
well,
know,
that changed with the Bribery Act, in fact.
yeah,
And I remember meeting the guy in Parliament who actually brought it in. And he said to me, he said, actually, the Bribery Act was all about arms deals and all the rest of it. He said,
yeah,
where the hospitality industry have now gone into, especially the corporate world, they said, you can't go out and have lunch with someone because that's a bribe.
yeah. I mean,
So it changed everything.
he wasn't particularly trying to bribe us. I mean, it was
Oh,
more
no, no. Yeah,
like
he
the
was
food
just
and
being
the company
hospitable.
was paying for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
but
nothing wrong with it.
yeah, but the world has changed. I mean,
Basically, we've got to eat. We've got to eat.
it's right, but the world, but it's an interesting point because the world has changed so much. The world
Yes,
has
it's changed a
completely
hell of a
changed.
lot. It's changed a hell of a lot. And even trends have changed. And COVID changed a lot of trends. And what happened with the trends is that people then really, really started to understand the most important thing with their family
Yeah,
because people lost their family through COVID
yeah,
and they never really spent time with them. And, funny enough, there's a lot of chief execs who have been really, really successful. And we've seen it where, their daughters or sons are 18 or 21 and they just haven't seen them grow up.
mm,
So as a result, they say, you know what, we'll book a hotel exclusive for 3, 4 days, bring all your friends. And, they think that's going to make up for the lost time. So that's what COVID's done. It's made people understand my family are the most important things. And now I should spend more time with them.
yeah.
And as a result of that, a lot more people have been going on.
And I mean, that's probably a change for the better on the
I
whole.
know, that's for sure.
And I mean, we've talked a lot about the journey that you've been on. I mean, just one final question. I mean, what sort of exciting things are you working on for the future? I mean, give us a sense of some of the things that are on the horizon for you, because
Well,
I know you're not giving up now.
no, no,
So,
no. But that's a really good question because about 7 years ago, we really focused by accident. I met a guy called Dr. Humberto Barbosa, who has a longevity clinic
oh wow,
in Portugal. And I met him just through the fact that he wanted to sell his house and he wanted it um, overseas buyers rather than local buyers. And when I got chatting to him, he showed me his business. And I said, wow, this is really interesting. And he showed me the results because everyone says they can do this. And my attitude is prove it. And he proved it. He proved to me that the clinics work and all the different aspects he had on health. So I spoke to a few customers and said, look, we're working with this clinic. And it was in Portugal. And I said, if you want to go down to Portugal for the weekend, go and have a complimentary assessment on your health and you will get a full assessment of everything. And you decide what you want to do. And to my surprise, people were so grateful. A lot of it was weight loss,
right.
and people were really grateful. And there was a couple who were neighbours of mine in London, and they were getting married, and they were both, when they had the assessment, they were both 13 kilograms overweight for their age and their height and all the rest of it. And again, cut a long story short, she said to me, Alan, you've just made me the happiest woman in the world. I am going to look fantastic in that wedding dress.
Mm.
And she didn't lose the whole 13, she lost 10 kilograms.
Wow, that's pretty good going.
It's a lot of weight for that period of time. And then I started to look at other people. And then people were saying to me, look, we're really interested in more of a wellness retreat rather than a holiday. So that's what's happened in the past few years, and that's what's happening now in the future. And things like a spa. I mean, in fact, yesterday I had a meeting with a hotel. The spas, if you look at a spa in different hotels take even London, the majority of them do the same thing. They might name their treatments differently, but effectively they're spa treatments. How much of it contributes to health is questionable because it makes you feel good and you feel great.
Nothing
And,
wrong with feeling good.
yeah,. But next week you want to go and have another one.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of it was all about, does it really help the wellness of that person?
Yeah.
And then I realized through working with the clinic, the fact that you can reverse diabetes too, type 2 diabetes, which I never knew. So I started to really understand health and wellness. And then even this year, in terms of the trends of the luxury market, which is my market, the wealthy and the very wealthy, they've got products, the watches, the jewelry, the cars, the houses, they're now into longevity,
Mm.
living longer, living healthier, and looking better. And that's where the money's being spent
Yeah,
in the
and you can
luxury.
understand why, can't you? I mean, it's a pretty important
Yeah,
thing.
no, and I think it makes absolute sense. It makes absolute sense. And we've proved it with the clinic and some of the clients we've worked with, is that if you look at your actual age opposed to your biological age, you can reduce your biological age. And that shows that you're going to be healthier inside, no matter what your age is.
Yeah.
And
And
there's lots of things that prove it, which I've gone through because we make sure we have the analysis and
yeah,
the actual facts
yeah.
before we do it.
I mean, it's a really interesting sort of shift, isn't it? Really. And I mean, are companies? Is it the sort of CEOs of big companies that are kind of becoming interested in that, or is it more broader than that? I mean, where's the
That's
demand
I'll
coming
tell you,
from?
that is a really good question. And I'll tell you why that's a really good question. Because when you look at HR departments in the major companies, within the companies, they have certain aspects of looking after their clientele.
Mm.
But, they might have a system where there's an annual checkup or whatever. But I don't know, a lot of the companies that I've spoken to, they don't have a program where they actually physically look after the health of their people.
Mm.
It's all very, very surface wise. And oh yeah, we'll just do an annual checkup and we'll just do this, that, the other. So no, and I think that, the clever companies, the clever chief execs are saying, you know what, even to keep our top employees or our key management team, we're going to look after them.
Mm.
And how it started, and it started years ago, and a friend of mine, he was an HR director of he was a client as well, but he ended up being a friend. He said to me one day, he said, Alan, we've got a real problem. He said, all of my key team are dying. I said, what do you mean they're dying? He said, well, they all eat a lot, they all drink a lot, they don't exercise, and they're all having heart attacks. And that made me think, and that was years ago.
Mm.
I thought, well, why don't you do something about it?
Mm. Yeah,
So
easier said than done, of course.
that's why it's a good question, because I think you know if companies were saying to their employees, as part of your employment, you are going to have a checkup twice a year, and we're going to do this, and this for you, they're going to think, well, actually, this company really care about me.
Yeah, and it has an impact, doesn't it? People feeling,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, in terms of recruitment
It
and
certainly has
retention.
an impact because people don't really fully understand, and there's not a lot of preventative medicine, preventative practices going on, and it's only when it's too late
Yeah,
they come to you. They can't. Well, they come to me and say, "Listen, I've got a problem,"
yeah,
but we could resolve that problem 2 years ago, whatever it may be. And there are certain statistics, that I've learned through working with the doctors. Like if your waist is, I think, 0.89 centimeters bigger than your hips as a man, you're going to have a coronary.
mm,
It could be this year, next year, but it's going to happen unless you do something about it.
yeah, yeah,
So, there's sort of a vital signs that make you think, okay, I think I better start to do something about this.
yeah.
But not, but not many people, understand them or recognise them,
Mm.
and not many people do anything about it until it's too late.
Yeah,
Which
and
is,
I mean, that's a fascinating story, Alan. I mean, it's so interesting the sort of shift that's taken and the direction that you're going in now. I mean, like you said, really exciting stuff, really interesting area to be developing new stuff in, really. So, I mean,
yeah, and then I realised, and it was again through this lady who said, you've changed my life. I'm the most beautiful bride, which I never thought I'd be. And I said to the doctor, I said, listen, I said, this is really interesting feedback from my client. How many women who are going to get married want to lose weight, whether it be 1 kilo or two
yeah,
kilos?
yeah,
They all feel as though they want to lose weight for their wedding. And some of the treatments, they're not expensive and they're not great big long diets. Some of them were within 30 days, and some of them were within 2 weeks. You can lose 2 or 3 kilos and in a non-evasive way. And he launched the weddings program.
yeah, yeah,
I tell you, it's amazing. And so we now say to people, look, if you just want to look a lot better, and I'm living proof because I lost 13 kilograms with him
wow,
7 years ago when we first met. Because I said to improve it, I don't believe it works, and I went through the program, and that's why I said, right, let's work together.
wow. Well, an interesting story. That's great, Alan. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's fascinating, and I mean, I'm sure there are lots more exciting things on your agenda that we can come back to at a later date, and perhaps you can have another chat, perhaps. But
Yeah,
thank
no,
you.
I'd love to. Yeah.
thank you for sharing that story. Thank you for telling us about what you've done and what you're doing. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. So I really appreciate you making a bit of time. And
You're welcome. I just hope it helps other people who, who maybe think, even if there's one point, think actually that's a really good point, and that would be worthwhile.
yeah, yeah, I think there's probably more than one or two little points of wisdom in that story that you've just been telling. I'm
Hopefully,
sure it will be useful to people. Alan, thank you for coming on, and let's catch up again soon.
it's my pleasure.
Cheers then. Bye bye.
All the best. Bye.